It began like any other quiet morning in Ashwood Falls. Dew still clinging to the leaves, the streets empty, except for the hum of a single patrol car. When officers arrived at the Marsh residence, the air inside felt suspended, as if time itself had held its breath. The breakfast table was half set, orange juice still in the glass, a child's backpack open beside an untouched plate. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, just the eerie perfection of a home that had been abruptly abandoned. Detective Laura Haynes stood in the doorway, eyes scanning the scene, searching for anything that made sense. But the silence spoke louder than any evidence. Something about this disappearance wasn't sudden. It was orchestrated, deliberate, almost rehearsed. And beneath that stillness she could feel it. The weight of a lie waiting to be uncovered. The yard looked untouched, except for the way silence pressed against it. Damp grass glistened beneath the slanted morning light, and the faint smell of pine hung in the air. Detective Haynes walked the perimeter, her breath visible in the chill. There were no tire tracks, no footprints, only the unsettling neatness of a life suddenly erased. Behind the house, the garden gate stood open, its hinges swaying softly in the wind. On the ground nearby, a single photograph lay face down in the dirt. She lifted it carefully, the Marsh family smiling on their porch. But when the sunlight hit the image, she noticed something faint. Half of Richard Marsh's face had been torn away. A symbolic absence, or something darker. Haynes felt a shiver crawl up her spine. Somewhere beyond the trees, a crow called once, sharp and cold, as though warning her that the truth was about to shift. Inside the living room, Officer Daniels cataloged the contents with quiet efficiency. Wallets, keys, cell phones, all left behind. People don't just vanish without their lives, he muttered. Haynes barely heard him. Her eyes had fixed on a detail others overlooked, the family calendar pinned to the wall. Every square of the month was filled with notes, school events, dinners, appointments. Except one. The day they vanished was blank, stark white in a sea of ink. She traced the emptiness with her gloved finger, feeling the chill of forethought. These people didn't disappear by accident. They'd planned it, or someone had planned it for them. Outside, the wind rose, slapping the blinds against the glass. The home sighed like something alive, exhaling a secret. By afternoon, the house was sealed, the perimeter lined with tape, the quiet street filling with curious eyes. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering theories that sprouted faster than evidence. Reporter Daniel Cross arrived, his camera bag slung across one shoulder, voice recorder already running. "Detective," he said evenly. "Any truth to the rumors?" Haynes shot him a look, half warning, half resignation. "Rumors are all anyone has right now," she replied. As he filmed the property from the curb, his lens caught something. An upstairs curtain shifting slightly, though no one was inside. When he looked again, it was still. The image would later haunt him, a reminder that even silence can move. That night, floodlights bathed the Marsh residence in a harsh white glow. Evidence teams combed the house once more, methodical and weary. Haynes stood on the front porch, her notebook open to a single question underlined twice: why leave everything behind? As the clock struck midnight, she looked toward the dark tree line and felt the sense of being observed. Somewhere out there, someone was watching this unravel. The case was no longer just about a missing family. It was about the image they'd built and who had destroyed it. As she closed her notebook, the first drops of cold rain began to fall, hissing softly against the wood, washing away the day's illusions. Morning came heavy with rain. The Marsh home, once glowing under the spotlight of curiosity, now felt stripped of its secrets, bare but unyielding. Detective Haynes sat inside her car outside the property, notebook open, listening to the rain pound against the windshield. The overnight forensic report was thin. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, no foreign DNA. The only trace anomaly was a partial fingerprint on the back of the torn photograph, too smudged for identification. It wasn't enough. Nothing ever was. A call came through the radio. The bank records were ready. Haynes started the engine. Somewhere in those numbers, she hoped, lay the beginning of truth, or the proof that truth had been carefully buried. At the local bank, records revealed something the Marshes never told anyone: multiple accounts under Evelyn's name, each opened in the past 3 months. Together, they totaled nearly $50,000. Money withdrawn in small increments, then gone. Haynes stared at the statements, tracing Evelyn's neat signature at the bottom of each page. It wasn't embezzlement or theft, it was preparation. Every account closed 2 days before the family vanished. They planned this, she murmured to herself. But planned what? An escape? Or something darker? Outside the bank, Daniel Cross waited under an umbrella, his reporter's instinct sharpening at the sight of her face. "Detective," he called. "You just found something, didn't you?" She didn't answer. Silence was safer than confirmation. By midday, the town buzzed with speculation. Social feeds erupted. Rumors of cult ties, offshore money, a family pact. Daniel Cross' story. Draft sat open on his laptop, half finished, each word more dangerous than the last. He hesitated before typing the headline. Something in his gut said this story wasn't about disappearance. It was about disappearance done perfectly. Meanwhile, Haynes revisited the Marsh house alone, drawn by a detail she couldn't shake: the open gate. She crouched beneath it, studying the soft earth. Embedded deep in the mud was a faint boot print, too large for Evelyn, too narrow for Richard. Someone else had been here, recently. She snapped a photo, heart pounding. The web was widening. The print was sent for analysis, but the results returned stranger than expected. Partial match, Richard Marsh. But the print showed an altered sole pattern, inconsistent with any shoe found in the house. It meant one thing: the print was made by someone wearing his boots, or by someone he'd taught to walk in his place. That night, Haynes met Daniel at a corner diner to discuss what they both knew, but hadn't yet admitted: this wasn't a disappearance. It was a performance. "They didn't vanish," Daniel said quietly over coffee. "They wanted us to think they did." Haynes looked out the rain-streaked window, the neon sign flashing red against her reflection. "Then the question isn't where they went," she whispered. "It's who's still pretending." Days later, a breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A gas station camera 2 miles from the Marsh home. Grainy, time-stamped footage captured Evelyn's car passing at 11:42 p.m., the night before the disappearance. But she wasn't alone. In the passenger seat sat a shadow, broad shoulders, masculine posture, but the frame froze before the face was clear. As the tape played in the evidence room, the hum of the projector filled the silence. Haynes leaned closer, the image flickering across her eyes. "Enhance it," she said softly. The technician adjusted the focus. The figure turned, just enough to reveal a familiar jawline. Richard Marsh, driving beside Evelyn. 2 people, both supposedly missing, heading into the darkness together. And behind them, through the rear window, a third silhouette. Small, childlike, moving faintly. The discovery of the gas station footage cracked the case open like glass under strain. Every assumption shattered. The Marshes weren't victims. They were participants in their own vanishing. Detective Haynes spent the next 48 hours reconstructing the family's last known movements. Financials, phone pings, surveillance, all orchestrated to dissolve at the same time. Someone had wiped their digital footprint with surgical precision. And yet, there was noise in the silence: one email unsent, buried in Evelyn's drafts. "You get what you wanted, but not the way you think." Haynes read it over and over, unsure whether it was a threat or a confession. The deeper she dug, the more she realized this wasn't one person's deception. It was a family built on it. Daniel Cross spent the night combing through old footage from the Marsh family's home videos, broadcast years earlier as part of a local Perfect Homes documentary. The smiles now looked strained, the laughter hollow. In one clip, Richard looks into the camera and says, A family's strongest when it shares everything. But a frame-by-frame analysis revealed something invisible to the naked eye. A hand. Evelyn's hand, tightening on his arm just as he finishes speaking. A subtle squeeze, control masked as affection. Daniel replayed it, each time feeling a chill deeper than before. These weren't memories. They were performances carefully directed and rehearsed for a truth no one wanted to see. Heinous investigation uncovered a second property. A storage unit rented under an alias 3 towns over. Inside, rows of locked cabinets and a single desk lamp burning low. Among the boxes, fake IDs, insurance forms, printed travel itineraries, all marked with dates that matched their disappearance week. But one envelope stood apart, labeled. For Elle, inside was a flash drive. The footage showed Evelyn sitting alone, speaking directly to the camera. "If you're watching this," she said calmly, "it means you found what you meant to. We built a lie because truth was never enough." Her voice trembled slightly. "Sometimes the only way to escape is to vanish." Haynes stared at the screen, goosebumps crawling her arms. This was no ordinary missing persons case. It was a self-erasure in plain sight. As Daniel pieced together Evelyn's confession, another layer emerged. The insurance records. Policies overlapping. Beneficiaries changing every 6 months. One policy, unsigned but active, listed Daniel's name. He froze, staring at the document, heartbeat thundering. Heinous call interrupted his spiral. "You might want to sit down. The unit's lease was paid with your credit card." Silence. The air thickened between them through the line. "That's impossible," he whispered. "Then someone wanted you tied to it," she said. Every thread they pulled tightened the web, looping around both of them now. This wasn't just the Marsh family's story. It was consuming everyone who touched it. By the end of the week, the illusion had fractured completely. The Marsh's life was not a story of love, but of leverage. Evelyn's video hinted at a pact gone wrong. A staged death for insurance, perhaps, or an escape from something darker. But Richard's records suggested betrayal, had forged withdrawal slips in her name. Each revelation cut deeper, turning victim and culprit into one. Late one night, Haynes reviewed security footage from the storage facility. At exactly 2:17 a.m., 2 nights before the discovery, a shadow entered the unit. The face, obscured by a hood, looked up once toward the camera and smiled. The timestamp flickered. When she replayed it, the footage was gone. A week after the last discovery, the Marsh home was no longer a crime scene. It was a tomb of questions. Contractors arrived to remove the kitchen floorboards as part of a final structural inspection. Beneath the foundation, they found something unexpected: a false wall, sealed with plaster and paint indistinguishable from the rest. When the panel broke away, the smell of dust and decay spilled out. A staircase descended into darkness, built by someone who knew the house better than anyone else. Detective Haynes stood at the threshold, flashlight trembling slightly in her hand. The silence below was absolute. This was no storage space. It was a secret kept alive by architecture, a truth hidden beneath the family's feet all along. Descending into the basement felt like crossing time itself. Each step groaned beneath the weight of discovery. The flashlight beams skimmed over walls lined with photographs, hundreds of them, taped edge to edge. Images of the Marsh family smiling at birthdays, dinners, school recitals. But in every frame, small differences appeared: a shadow missing here, a hand slightly out of place there. Near the far wall stood a single metal chair, a camera tripod aimed at it. "This isn't storage," Haynes whispered. "It's a set." Daniel Cross arrived moments later, breathless, camera in hand. The air smelled faintly of film chemicals. Someone had documented everything, not just their life, but their lies. The videotapes stacked in crates told the story the photographs only hinted at. Each was labeled meticulously. Day 4, dinner, apology, practice. Haynes played one. The screen came alive with Evelyn and Richard at their dining table, voices low but deliberate, repeating the same phrases like lines from a script. We love each other. We are happy. We are safe. Over and over. Mechanical, rehearsed. Haynes leaned forward as Evelyn's voice faltered mid-sentence, her eyes darting toward the camera, pleading, breaking character for a second before the image cut to black. It wasn't a home movie. It was captivity disguised as normalcy. Forensics later confirmed something that made even the most seasoned officers flinch. The basement construction matched Richard's handwriting in the original house blueprints. He had designed this chamber himself, but it wasn't meant for storage. It was meant for control. He filmed his family nightly, monitoring behavior, rehearsing scenes of domestic bliss that never truly existed. Evelyn's hidden email suddenly made sense. You'll get what you wanted. But not the way you think. She had turned his creation against him. The question now wasn't whether they'd escaped. It was who had walked away first. Night fell as the investigation ended for the day. The Marsh home, once a picture of serenity, now stood gutted and hollow, its secret exposed. Haynes lingered in the basement, staring at the metal chair, her reflection rippling across the camera lens, still aimed at it. She whispered softly to no one, "What were you rehearsing for?" A draft of cold air swept through the opening above, extinguishing her flashlight for a heartbeat. In that brief darkness, she could almost hear Evelyn's voice, calm, distant, repeating from the tape, "We are safe." But safety had never lived here. Only surveillance. Only ghosts. Ashwood Falls was changing. What had once been a quiet town of trimmed lawns and morning greetings now pulsed with unease. The Marsh home, cordoned off and abandoned, became the town's new pilgrimage site, a monument to unanswered questions. Rumors bloomed faster than evidence. Some said Evelyn had joined a cult. Others swore they'd seen Richard in the woods at night. Detective Haynes walked Main Street under the glow of shop lights, watching neighbors turn away from one another, their trust decaying like old paint. Lies had seeped into the town's veins, transforming every conversation into interrogation. Whatever the Marshes had built in secret was now infecting everyone left behind. Daniel Cross' report aired that evening. A restrained, factual summary, laced with something more dangerous doubt. The Marshes may not have disappeared, he said in voiceover, but the truth might have. Within hours, the story went viral, sparking fury from locals who felt betrayed by the intrusion. Anonymous messages flooded his inbox, some thanking him, others threatening him. Haynes called him just past midnight. "You've started something you can't control," she warned. He exhaled into the receiver. "Maybe it was already out of control," he said softly. As he hung up, he noticed the envelope slid under his door. No name. Just a black and white photograph of himself standing outside the Marsh home. The caption scrawled beneath, "You're next to vanish." The following morning, Haynes arrived at the station to find it buzzing with chaos. Tips were pouring in, everyone wilder than the last. A neighbor swore they'd seen Evelyn buying groceries at dawn. Another claimed to have received a phone call in her voice, whispering a single word: "Run." Forensics debunked each lead within hours, but the hysteria didn't fade. The Marsh disappearance had become a mirror, reflecting every fear, every hidden lie the town had tried to forget. Even within the department, officers argued about what was real. Haynes watched it unfold from her office, the din of confusion below her, like a storm she could no longer calm. The town meeting that evening was meant to bring calm. It did the opposite. 100 residents packed into the old church hall, voices rising into accusation. "You're hiding something," one man shouted. "They're not dead," cried another. When Haynes stepped forward to speak, the room turned restless. She explained the evidence, the recordings, the false accounts, but logic no longer mattered. These people weren't searching for truth. They were searching for closure, even if they had to invent it. Daniel filmed from the back, capturing every flare of anger. The footage would later show something he hadn't noticed at the time. A woman in the second row, head bowed, hands trembling, whispering Evelyn's name over and over like a prayer. Later that night, Daniel uploaded the meeting footage to his drive. As the video rendered, he noticed something uncanny. A reflection caught in one of the church's stained glass panels. Behind Haynes, outside the window, a faint silhouette appeared for less than a second. The outline of a woman with long hair, standing motionless in the rain, watching. He enhanced the frame. The face was obscured by shadow, but the resemblance was undeniable. Evelyn Marsh. He sat frozen. The hum of his computer fan, the only sound in the room. Somewhere outside, thunder rolled low, and the lights flickered once, just enough for his screen to go black. 2 days after the town meeting, the investigation took a turn that would unravel everything. An encrypted drive was discovered inside Daniel's mailed package. No return address. No explanation. Forensics traced it to a signal near the Marsh property, time-stamped the same night the footage flickered out. When opened, the drive contained one file titled Final Draft. It wasn't a confession. It was a film. A seamless edit of every tape from the basement, rearranged into a narrative that made chilling sense. Haynes watched, transfixed, as Evelyn's calm voice narrated over a montage of her family's staged perfection. "Every lie," she said, "needs an ending. We built ours together." The screen faded to black, then returned to a static frame, a clock ticking toward midnight. The film began like an ordinary home video. The Marsh children laughing in the backyard, Evelyn waving from the porch, Richard at the grill. But then, the camera shifted focus. The same moments replayed, slightly altered, the angles different. On screen, Evelyn's smile trembled, eyes darting towards someone behind the camera. A voice, Richard's, whispered. Again. The sequence repeated. Again. Again. Each iteration more lifeless than the last. And then came the final scene. Evelyn sitting in the basement, hands folded neatly in her lap, facing the lens. "He wanted a perfect family," she said softly, "so I gave him one. But perfection requires sacrifice." Her eyes flicked upward, as if acknowledging someone unseen. Then she whispered, "It's time to cut." The feed dissolved into static. When the screen faded, silence swallowed the room, then a faint hiss. An audio layer they hadn't noticed before. Haynes replayed the file, isolating the background track. Beneath Evelyn's words, faint breathing patterns emerged. 2 adult, 1 child. Forensics enhanced it. 3 heartbeats, measured, synchronized. Not a recording of a confession, a live feed. The realization hit like ice. Someone was watching, still transmitting. Haynes scrambled to trace the signal. It pinged from beneath the Marsh property, the basement's coordinates. But the room had been sealed since the last investigation. Her eyes widened. "It's coming from below," she whispered. The house wasn't done speaking. They reached the Marsh property just after midnight. Rain came down in sheets, soaking through their coats as they forced open the warped basement door. The hidden room looked unchanged. Chair, photographs, silence, but the hum of machinery echoed faintly from the walls. Following the sound, Haynes found a narrow crawl space behind the far wall, lined with wires. At the end, a small camera, still recording, its red light pulsing steadily. "Who set this up?" Daniel whispered. Haynes stared at the monitor attached to the device. It displayed a live feed. But not of the room, of them, standing exactly where they were. A perfect reflection. And in the corner of that feed, a 4th figure, unmoving, half in shadow, watching. Static erupted through the monitor as the figure moved forward, closer to the lens. The feed trembled, distortion crawling across the image until the camera died. When the screen went black, So did the room's light. In total darkness, Haynes heard Daniel whisper, "It was never about them disappearing." His voice broke. It was about who they left behind. The power flipped back, just long enough for her to see. The chair was no longer empty. On its seat lay the torn half of the family photograph, the missing piece of Richard's face taped back in place. Haynes exhaled, trembling. Somewhere in the shadows, a faint recording began to play. Evelyn's voice once more. "Every lie needs an ending." Morning broke pale and silent over Ashwood Falls. The storm finally spent. The Marsh property was swarmed again. Police units, investigators, forensics teams, all moving through the mist with cautious reverence. Word spread quickly. Something had been found beneath the house. Detective Haynes stood motionless as ground crews uncovered a secondary chamber under the crawlspace, one that hadn't appeared on any blueprint, not even Richard's altered designs. Inside were 3 sealed containers, perfectly aligned. The air was heavy, almost reverent, as they pried open the first lid. The silence that followed was worse than any scream. What they found wasn't decay. It was preservation. The Marshes hadn't vanished. They'd been waiting. Forensics confirmed it within hours. The remains were the Marsh families: Richard, Evelyn, Sophie, and Liam, perfectly preserved through vacuum-sealed isolation. The shocking detail wasn't their condition, but the timestamps etched into the container lids. Each date marked weeks after the night they disappeared, meaning someone had returned long after to entomb them. Daniel stood in the rain as the coroner's van doors closed, camera still in hand, no longer filming. "So, who was in that footage?" he whispered. Haynes didn't answer. She simply looked toward the darkened windows of the house, where condensation had begun to form from the inside, as if something unseen was still breathing there. Inside the evidence room, the recovered tapes played once more, but something was different. Between the static, a new clip appeared, unmarked and previously inaccessible. The footage showed Evelyn sitting in the basement again, but this time she wasn't performing. Her voice trembled. "If anyone finds this," she said, "don't look for us. Look for him." She turned toward the camera, eyes wide with terror. He said the film isn't over until the audience understands. Then she mouthed a name, barely visible. "Daniel." The tape cut to black. He stumbled backward, pulse racing. "No," he whispered. "That's impossible." Haynes turned toward him slowly, realization dawning like sunrise over wreckage. The deeper Haynes searched Daniel's past, the less she found. His press credentials were real, but his employment history was a maze. Multiple aliases, inconsistent records, interviews that never aired. He'd arrived in Ashwood Falls only months before the Marshes vanished, drawn by an anonymous tip. When confronted, Daniel's composure cracked. "I didn't know them," he insisted. But Haynes' voice was steady, cold. "Then why were you on their insurance policy?" His silence stretched, his camera still recording on the table between them. "Finally," he whispered, "because the story needed an ending." She stared at him, horror and comprehension intertwining. He hadn't just reported the Marsh family's disappearance, he had authored it. The final revelation came weeks later. A forensic team analyzing Daniel's footage uncovered hidden metadata embedded in every video file he'd ever shot. Each contained fragments of Evelyn's audio, her image spliced like echoes, as though someone had been layering her voice into his work long after her death. Whether Daniel knew it or not, he'd been continuing her film, completing the narrative she began. The last shot on his recovered camera was chillingly simple. A slow pan across the Marsh home at dawn, the front door creaking open by itself. Haynes' final narration would close the case report years later. Some lies are so complete, they outlive their creators. And some stories never end. They just change narrators.